the Maharil discuss the question of what happens if a few families are out there together. Now, I want to explain, we're not talking about a hotel situation. We're talking about what happens if a few families, for example, a few families rent a place to eat together. If any of you ever were in the Haretzion, had a simcha at the Haretzion, right, the Gush. They rent out rooms and they rent out a dining room. And you have your own dining room, and several families will go there together. They'll supply the food, but the room is yours. It's not like a hotel where many different people convene, having nothing to do with each other, not necessarily having to do with each other. The room is yours. Do as you please, right? Or if you have a simcha and you rent a local hall, a few families will rent a local hall. What do you do then? So the Maharil says, שניים שלושה בעלי בתים אוכלים במקום אחד, כל אחד מברך על מנורה שלו. אף על פי שיש כבר אורה מרובה. So you have a lot of light, and still each of the guests can light on his own candle. Right, menorah here is not Chanukiah, right? Every one of the guests can light on their own candle, can bring their own what do you call it? Candlesticks, and light them. He didn't like this. That's the minhag, so you could make the bracha. Now the question is why? If there is sufficient light, he doesn't write sufficient, right? He writes a lot of light. All right, I don't know if that's important. I think it could be for the next sentence. עניות דעתי, נראה לי ליישב, בכל מה שמתווסף אורה, יש בשלום בית תפי, בשמחה יתרה להנאת אורה בכל זוויות וזוויות. So he's saying, why could you light more candles and make a bracha on more candles? Because you never really have sufficient light. You can always add more light. Now, of course, I'm going to ask Rafi, is this true nowadays?
It is in my house.
Okay, so that's fair.
We have drawers and drawers of candles.
You have what?
Many candles.
Okay, fair enough. If specifically you have the need, if specifically you're in a house that's poorly lit, so. But I'm saying you've seen these halls. You have a dining hall, right? A few families go to a big dining hall. They're very, very well lit. It's hard to justify and say, yeah, well, there's more light now. Like, yeah, you really can't.
It's always nicer. I'm not saying we have a poorly lit house. I'm saying I do believe it's always nicer with more candles.
Again, nicer as a romantic notion, or nicer or better lit. I'm just saying.
Doesn't have me.
He says mitvasef ora. Does it actually add more light?
And why don't you apply that principle then to the idea of electric light plus candles?
So we asked that question, and there again with that question, so Shema Chata says nachinami, turn the lights off. There Sternbuch says Rav Sternbuch is saying basically what Rafi's saying, right? And Rav Klein says the bracha is on everything you're doing, but that works in your own house. It doesn't work when you go to someone else's dining hall and the lights are already on and you're not really doing anything. You're just lighting another candle that you brought from home. That's the difference. See what I'm saying? My problem is that's all very well to say about your own house. To say, all right, I'm making bracha on everything I lit. You went to now you're at a dining hall, someone else's, a public one, or you rented one. It's sufficiently lit. Now, Nagid, you can justify the first person lights the Shabbos candles. Fine. The first woman, she could light the Shabbos candle. What about everyone else? You have three families together. Can they all light? It would seem that maybe the first one can. What about everyone else? So the Maharil says, yeah, it's always good to have more light. Is that really true nowadays? All right, so first of all, there's a machloket between the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah whether to accept it. Shulchan Aruch doesn't like it. So the first one, as I said, you can justify. The rest you really can't. It's hard. So even in their days, even Shulchan Aruch, lived in the Middle Ages, even then Shulchan Aruch said the first one should make a bracha, the rest not. No, add more light, do the best you can, but really should make more than one bracha. The Ramah says, meaning we're not noheg to be so careful. Right? We allow everyone to make their own bracha. And now again, so in the Ramah's time, the Ramah lived in Poland in the Middle Ages, so beseder, of course you always need more light. Right? You're in Poland in the Middle Ages, of course you need more light. But what about nowadays? Is that relevant nowadays? The Garshaz asked this question. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach asks, how can you make a bracha if it's sufficiently lit and there are other people there? So how can you make a bracha? Right, I want to remind you, Shlomo Zalman is the one who said, turn your lights off, go back to the Middle Ages. So that could be a solution, but will that work in a public wedding hall, right? In a public dining hall where there is sufficient light and you're not going to start playing with the lights? And the first person can make a bracha. What about the rest? Shevet HaLevi has a very lumdish, I'd say, lumdish and metuchkam. What's a good word for metuchkam? That's what it's eluding me at the moment. Right?
Sophisticated.
Yeah, but right. Okay. I think metuchkam has a more specific, that sophisticated lamshane. Anyway, so Shevet HaLevi says like this. He says, what happens? You have 4 families eating at this hall together. Fine. Now, what did we say just now? You could justify the first person making a bracha, right? That's fair, right? You can justify the first person making the bracha, right? Okay. Who's the first person?
First person to light.
So that's what you think. But why should your lighting disqualify my bracha? You have no more rights here than I do. So if we both have the option of making the bracha, your lighting should not invalidate my bracha.
But that's not true, because it goes back to what we discussed last week about whether it's kind of like a chovat gavra or chefza. Like, if I need to make sure that I have light in my house, then when Michelle lit first, she already took care of that for me too. And now I've done, whether I wanted to or not, it's taken care of.
Right. So I very much identify with the problem. The problem is that we're not talking about a ma'aseh. You see, his assumption is that we're talking about some kind of ma'aseh mitzvah, right? You say, well, you can't steal my ma'aseh mitzvah, right? Since candlelighting is focused on the outcome and not on the ma'aseh, so right, in other mitzvah, you say, well, you stole my mitzvah. Well, you can't really steal a mitzvah as such. If I can still do my mitzvah even though you stole it, right? That's what we
have halachot about stealing mitzvot, specifically in the context of candlelighting. If I steal my wife's candlelighting, I need to pay her money, right? Like,
yes. So the classic Gemara that discusses this in Chulin talks about kisui hadam, right, covering the blood of fowl or animal, right? That you have to cover after you shecht. So what happens if someone else covered it for you? So it's covered. You can't not cover it. So here's the point. Normally, this distinction, what mitzvot can you steal? On the other hand, if you're baking challah and I come and I take the challah, right? I'm a fresh challah, right? I take the challah out of the dough. That didn't invalidate everything. It just didn't work, right? Because here there was no, because the question is the mitzvah to achieve a certain outcome, or is the mitzvah to do a certain action, right? That's the normal distinction, right? Normally we differentiate between what mitzvah can be stolen, which ones cannot. A mitzvah can only be stolen if the point of the mitzvah is the outcome, right? You achieve the outcome already, you can no longer steal the mitzvah. So this should not work for candlelighting. right? Shevet HaLevi is looking at candlelighting as a mitzvah that's on the Gavra. I mean, he even says that, right? Let's quickly read this. בשניים שלושה בעלי בתים האוכלים על שולחן אחד, שכל אחד מברך על המנורה שלו, כיוון שכל אחד עיקר לעצמו, ואינו טפל לחברו, אין כדין סמוך על שולחן אחרים, שאינם מתבטלים זה לזה. שוב נשאר חיוב גברה על כל אחד, ורשאי לברך. But, right, it's very interesting because we haven't looked at candlelighting as a chovat gavra until now, as, you know, so not chovat gavra because, you know, only one person in the family does it, fine, so it's a family mitzvah, but that's what he says, it's a family mitzvah. We assumed it's an outcome issue. If it's an outcome issue, so yes, someone can steal it from the others. As Yaakov said, we have mitzvah that we know you can steal from other people. So it's a very strange take in that sense, right? To say it's a chiyuv gavra is very surprising. But it gets worse because Rav Shlomo Zalman's answer is really the end. It'll also be, incidentally, it'll also be the end of the shiur. But this is really where we reached the lowest point in this context. He says like this. Rafi's laughing because he's saying like, what do you just don't get it. You just don't understand the importance of Adlakat Nerot. He says like this, כיוון שכל הנשים הנשואות מקפידות מאוד על מצווה זו, לכן אפשר שגם נעשה כמנהג חשוב להוסיף נרות כאלה לשם מצווה ולברך על זה, אף שמעיקר הדין נקבע להנאת תורה, גם קיבלו על עצמם הדלקת נרות לכבוד שבת בכל אופן שהוא, אוקיי? wait for it. אולי יש לומר, מכיוון שאנשים רגילות להדליק נרות שבת בביתם מדי שבת לשבתו, יהיה בכך משום תוספת שמחה אם לא נבטל מהן את מצוותן. וכל אחת תדליק במקום אכילתה. How wonderful is that? We started from Oneg Shabbat as in seeing your soup. Because you want to see your soup when you're eating. That's Oneg Shabbat. You don't want to bump into things. Then you say, yeah, but you can add more light. It's always, you know, it's more fun to have more light. All right, fine. Add more light. That's fun. Fair enough. Fine. You know, that's, yeah, but do you know how much pleasure I get out of light, or sorry, how much displeasure I'd get out of not being able to light? The lighting itself, right? This is, you see what I mean, Rafi, by worse, right? But it's one thing when you say, having the Shabbos candles on the table, right, Rav Sternbuch, right? Having the Shabbos candles on the table, that, you know, gives better vibes, better ambiance. Fair enough, fine. I understand. I get it. I've been to candlelit dinners. I get it. I see that. I don't think it's the original takana, but fine. So it, as I said, it pivoted from that kavod and oneg to this kavod and oneg. But Shlomo Zalman here is saying, yeah, but what about candlelighting? It's like, look how much light we have here. Like, yeah, but candlelighting. But the Chabad women handing out the candles, that's what women identify with in their Judaism. So how can you take that away from anyone? I see the feeling. Really, I find it astonishing that Shlomo Zalman would say, and therefore you can make a bracha. Make a bracha. No? Isn't that astonishing? I think it's astonishing.
It's on a life of its own.
What?
He's not even choshesh.
It's taken on a life of its own.
Right. It's not taking a life of its own. Bracha levatala, all these things like that's, you know, Oneg Shabbat. It's, you know, lehavdil, it reminds me of, you know, my Chiloni friends in the army, or my kind of, you know, it's definitely not the Chiloni ones in Golani. You know, no one's really Chiloni in Golani. Everyone's like, you know, Masorti, right? They're all traditional, right? They say like, yeah, they'd be very careful about certain things on Shabbos, but smoking would be like, that's my oneg. That is my oneg Shabbat, you know.
It's really like the joke about Tachanun. Like, we could really just not say Tachanun because that would make us really happy.
Right.
So then, of course, like
on such a happy day, they don't say Tachanun. How can you say Tachanun? Right. So yeah, it's much taken on a life of its own, right? It's astonishing. Astonishing that I say bracha levatal. Again, no problem. I'm you want people to have fun, I'm all for that. You want people to feel happy in their lives. That's a very important thing. To now say yes, so all the women can make a bracha when you're at a hotel and in some corner you're gonna set up some candles in the corner, no one's gonna see them, and you're gonna have 400 candles there, and no one's gonna even see the candles there, and you have already 380 candles, and you're lighting number 381, 382, and you're gonna make a bracha on that? The answer is yes. Yes, that's your Oneg Shabbat. Yes, you better, Okay, so as Michelle is saying, there are those who are more machmir. Now, I will read the Shema Shakil Chata, who, again, he says this to justify the minhag. He does propose a better solution. Better meaning more lumdishly sound. Okay, Rafi. בעלי בתים נמצאים בבית הבראה או במלון, הם ונשיהם ואוכלים בחדר אוכל משותף, המנהג הוא שכל אישה תדליק נרות בברכה בחדר האוכל. מכל מקום, כיוון שיש לכל משפחה חדר מיוחד, גם אם אינו משמש אלו לשינה בלבד, טוב שאישה אחת תדליק נרות בחדר אוכל בברכה, והאחרות תדלקנה בברכה, כל אחת בחדר שלה, ויהיו נרות גדולים שלא יכבו לפני בואם לחדר. So he has a better solution. He says, this goes back to what Rav Baruch asked at the beginning, about lighting in the dining hall where there's sufficient light, or lighting in the room where you're the only one who's in charge of that. And he says, ultimately, it's better. So maybe you're giving up on lighting where you're eating, but on the other hand, lighting where you don't need the light where you're eating. So it's preferable to make a bracha on making sure you have the right light. So if I want to translate this into the Rav Klein's language, right? I'd say, make sure the light in the bathroom is on. Make sure the light in the hall or whatever setup you have there, right? The night light, whatever it is that you have in your actual room, right? Your private room, and then light candles there and make a bracha of kavanah on all of that. That's more sound than saying. Still, Rosh Shlomo Zalman will always prefer making a bracha on candles that are actually needed. Obviously. He only says, well, when all else fails, you could somech on this and say, you're not going to tell your wife, here's rule number 1. Don't tell your wife not to light candles with the bracha. Now, where? Good question. So, it's best in the room because there it's really needed. If all else fails, we're going to see this a few more times later on. But if all else fails, still, she has to have her Oneg Shabbat. Still, you have to allow her to make a bracha somewhere. Right, to make a bracha light somewhere. The question is only where. We're going to see this in a few other places, specifically here in the context of the hotel. If the hotel allows you to make the bracha on the candles that are in your room, good. If not, light in the cheder ochel, have kavanah, right? In the dining hall, have kavanah on on all the lights that you made sure that for your private need, because otherwise it really